Welcome back, everybody, to the sSEC Weekly Show. I'm your host, Ezeco, and this is the show where we take a look at simulated college football. This is not real college football. That has starting off great, a lot of great matchups in the real world, but we are looking at internet football and the internet SEC. If that intrigues you at all, take a look down in the description, check out the website, check out the teams we have available. Maybe take over a team for yourself. There's still some open in the SEC as well. Lead them on to a winning record at least. That's what most people are looking for right now. Winning record, conference championship, take them on to the 12-team college football playoff. That's right. We're at the cutting edge here where the real world's just getting ready to move to it in about 4 years. We're doing it now. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at Week 8 action. We've got a lot of good matchups. Again, all 14 teams in SEC play. That's 7 SEC versus SEC games, including that big one down there, number 17 LSU taking on number 6 Tennessee in Death Valley, which is probably going to be our preview for the SEC championship game, as both teams are really running away with their division. If you're looking at the numbers over here, we've got 4 teams in the top 25 in the SEC. That's a dip down from previous weeks where we had at most 5. There's some teams that are stumbling, looking for some answers, and hopefully they can find them this week. But let's get started with our matchups. A good one down in Tuscaloosa with Alabama taking on Mississippi State. And Alabama takes this one 38-7. Mississippi State has been surging, and Alabama had been on a downtrend. But Alabama gets back down to Tuscaloosa, gets a home game, and really shows everybody that they still haven't gone away, even though it's really tough to win road games, not just in this league, but in college football as a whole. Their quarterback goes 20 for 32 in his passing, 62.5%, 247 yards, throws a touchdown, an interception, and gets sacked one time. So he goes 1-1-1 right there. He does target 8 different receivers, so he's spreading the ball around great. In addition to those 32 yards, they actually hit the ground a lot in this game with only 2 guys, but they do rush it 48 times and get it 340 yards. That's 587 yards on offense for Alabama here, and you can see it in the way they just absolutely crushed Mississippi State. 4 touchdowns coming on the ground. Gio Thayer, defensive back for Alabama, gets behind that line of scrimmage and sacks Mississippi State's quarterback twice of their 4 sacks that they get. And look at that, 15 tackles for loss for Alabama. I think that's the highest for this week. That might be, if not the highest, is the second highest that we've seen since we started this show about 3 weeks ago. That's crazy from the Alabama defense. So they really turned it up and were upset that people were doubting them. So they tried to put it back on. Their kicker goes perfect, 5 for 5 on his extra points. Even kicks a 44-yard field goal just to put a cherry on top. So Alabama's going to go up 4-3 overall. They're still going to be 4th in the West, sitting at 2-2. Mississippi State, on the other hand, has a difficult day. They really can't get anything going. Their quarterback throws it 31 times, and they only get caught 15 times through 7 different targets. Only gets 141 yards to the air, and that's where their single touchdown comes from. And like we talked about earlier, he gets put on the ground 4 times, which he's hurting after this game. He's got to be. Take Sunday off, man, because you got crushed. 3 different rushers, 32 rush attempts, and they only get 52 yards on those 32 rush attempts. Defense doesn't do much well. They do recover the fumble 1 time, but only grab 1 interception, only get behind the line of scrimmage 3 times, one of those being a sack, and they don't have any attempts at field goals because they have to punt the ball 13 times for a total of 749 yards, which is just crazy. That is the most punts this week for any team in the SEC. Most yardage, of course, but that's because you're punting the ball 13 times. Now, they do lose this game, but they're not going to lose any ground in the chase for the West there. And we'll find out later on why, but they're going to go 5-3 overall, 3-2 in the SEC. They're going to stay second in the West because the West was just a slugfest this week. Moving on, we're going to head down to Arkansas, where Arkansas is taking on South Carolina. And we've got our rare road victory here with South Carolina taking down Arkansas 24-10. We've talked about before how South Carolina is kind of one of those not really sleeper teams. They're kind of tricky. You know, we didn't expect them to be quite as good as they were. But going on the road to Arkansas and beating them, a West team who is decent. Their record is 3-5 after this game, but they're better than their record looks. South Carolina takes this one 24-10. They have a great day. I mean, Eli Braden, their running back, and then the quarterback for South Carolina both have great days. 225 yards to the air on 78.8% completions. They get a touchdown through the air. They get 2 touchdowns on the ground, 162 yards on the ground, no interceptions, no fumbles, so no turnovers for South Carolina whatsoever. And they do get sacked one time, but it's only one, which in this league, just one is about as good as 0. Their defense does really well too. They get 2 sacks on Arkansas. J.R. Garcia takes away 2 picks from Arkansas as well. Kicker goes perfect again, 3 for 3 on his extra points, and a field goal to cap it off as well from 31 yards. Arkansas, on the other hand, has not a great day. Not awful. You know, we've seen these stats before, and teams have won on this, but 53.3% on his completion rate, 16 for 30, 110 yards. No touchdowns in the air. The 1 touchdown comes from Elijah Wendelken, which was their only rusher all day. He ran the ball 40 times for 152 yards. And that's another strategy we've seen before in this league. You just keep running the ball, and eventually you're going to get through. There's a magic number in there somewhere, and if somebody's good at math and those magic numbers, they'll find it. Somewhere between 35 and 40. You run the ball less than 35 times, you're only going to get 50-something yards. It's not going to be great. You get it somewhere closer to 40, and you're looking at your 150-yard games with your 1 touchdown. They do try and hit 6 different receivers. Defense does okay. They get behind the line of scrimmage more times than South Carolina with 7 tackles for loss, but only just getting the 1 sack and no takeaways for the Arkansas defense. And they get 1 extra point off their touchdown, and they get a field goal from 36 yards to get their 10 points. Arkansas falls to 3-5 overall and 2-3 in the SEC, so they'll be 5th in the West. And South Carolina maintains pace, 3-2 in the SEC. They're going to be 3rd in the East with a 4-4 overall record, so they're sitting right at 500 with a decent path to finish the season with at least 7 wins. Probably going to get a bowl game. May not be the best one you could hope for, but they're going to get there. Arkansas is on the hunt. They've got a slim margin to get to that bowl game, and it's going to be a rough road for them. Let's move it down back to Alabama. We're going to get to Auburn, and Auburn taking down the number 10 team in the country, Missouri. Missouri has really been slipping these past couple weeks with the loss to Tennessee and now the loss to Auburn. And it's a pretty good game from both teams, really. I mean, you'd expect either one of these teams to win, and looking at these stats, you'd almost think that the score should be higher. Auburn's quarterback goes 29 for 50. He has 58% completion rate. Missouri's quarterback goes 24 for 39, 61.5 completion rate. That's pretty similar. 417 yards through the air for Auburn, 259 through the air for Missouri. Obviously, that's a bit of a difference, but then we look down at the rushing yards. Missouri puts it on the ground quite a bit more, and they get 132 yards on the ground as opposed to the 23 yards from Auburn. So Auburn's putting the ball on the ground 20 times and only getting 23 yards out of it. But they are not trying to run the ball at all. You can't throw the ball every single time. Your quarterback's arm's going to get tired. So they're just giving them a little break with those cute 20 little rushing yard attempts. Missouri, on the other hand, is trying to balance it out. They have a balanced game, but it's not enough to pull it off. Now, both teams do really well on defense. Auburn takes away 2 interceptions. Kyle Smith, the defensive back, he gets 2 sacks for his own. They get 8 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Missouri themselves, their defense has been killer all year, especially ever since we've been doing this program. They've had double-digit tackles for loss every game we've looked at. They get an interception as well, 2 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. Now, here's where Auburn could have slipped up. You could very easily have seen Auburn lose this game because of, we look down there, as we always harp on this program, field goals, field goals, field goals. Auburn misses an extra point. and they miss a field goal. Now, they do have I believe they have their quarterback taking kicks. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure their quarterback's taking kicks. That kicking room is not strong down in Auburn, but your quarterback taking kicks is still another risk in itself. There's a lot of quarterbacks taking kicks around the league. It is what it is. Now, if Auburn misses that second kick, and they miss another extra point, if Missouri can even attempt a field goal, which they don't do, they get all three of their extra points, but they never attempt a field goal, that's very easily a flip in favor of Missouri, who could have made that field goal and won. So you've got to make those kicks. You've got to have a kicker in the room. People talk about not recruiting kickers. It's important. We see it in this. We saw it last week with a game that was important. It was 6-3 game where there was missed field goals all over the place. So Missouri is going to stay second in the East, even with the loss. They're going to go to 5-2 overall, 3-2 in the SEC. Now Auburn is going to rise up a little bit, and they're going to come up to third in the West, 3-1 in the SEC, 4-3 overall. If you're in the West, you're a coach in the West, keep your eyes on Auburn because they haven't played a lot of SEC games up to this point, but the ones they have played, they've come out and they've won well. So don't sleep on Auburn yet. Moving on up to my team, it's Kentucky taking on Georgia, and for the first time since we started doing this program, Kentucky gets a win. It's not pretty. We didn't deserve to win. If I was going to pick a heartbreak game of the week, it's going to be this one, but we're a little biased on this program towards Kentucky and the SEC East, and sorry, you can't have the heartbreak game of the week if I'm the one who beat you. That's not exactly true, but we'll get to one point, I'm sure. So, Kentucky, 12 for 31 on their passing, only 38.7%. Michael Oliveros has got to be better if Kentucky's going to have a shot at a bowl game. And they went from playoff aspirations to, gosh, I just hope we can make a bowl game at this point. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Only 97 yards through the air, a touchdown and an interception, but he doesn't get sacked this week, so that's great for him. Georgia, on the other hand, this is where this is important. He's getting 28 for 55 of his passing. He completes over 50% of his passes, 318 yards through the air. That's a great day for Georgia's quarterback. This is a game, like I said, Georgia should have won this game. If you just look at pure stats, 318 yards through the air, 127 yards on the ground. But they could not get it into the touchdown. Couldn't finish it off. This is one of the few games I did break down this week. I watched the play-by-play, and the first quarter was absolutely awful. Okay, I might repeat myself here a little bit. Sorry, I had a phone call, pause it so we didn't have to restart. But this is one of the games I did break down a little bit. Neither team was able to get this game going at all in the first quarter. If I remember correctly, neither team crossed the 50-yard line at all. Georgia may have crossed it one time and gotten to Kentucky's 49-yard line. So the first quarter was just terrible on both sides. Neither team could move the ball, and we see that if we go down, just skip ahead a little bit to the special teams. Kentucky punts the ball 11 times in this game for 627 yards, and Georgia punts it 10 times for 485. And that might be what ends up being the difference here, besides the missed kicks, which we'll get to as well. But just how much Kentucky can punt the ball down the yard and put Georgia on that long field. Second quarter, Georgia gets into the red zone once, but they miss the 19-yard chip shot field goal. Again, field goals, guys, you're going to get so sick of me saying them. That could have turned the game right there, but they miss it. Neither team scores for the entire first half. That's the only time either team gets into the red zone in the first half, is that Georgia missed field goal. Georgia misses a field goal in the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. Kentucky never even attempts a field goal, which is fine if you're going to win the game. But when they do get into the red zone, they do score, which is good. Georgia doesn't. They get into the red zone and they cannot convert, with the exception The one time they score was actually outside the red zone with that 24-yard field goal, and it's a tough day for them entirely. Kentucky's one shining point, besides getting the W, is that Kelvin Dupree finally shows up again. He gets a little over 160 yards in rushing, I believe. He has both their touchdowns. Kentucky runs it for 43 times, but only 180 yards. And if you're going to run the ball that many times, you need to have more than 180. Defensively, Kentucky has not a great day. No interceptions, which is fine, so no turnovers. They do get a sack on the Georgia quarterback one time. 2 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Just not the best day that you've seen from a defense. Georgia, on the other hand, does sack Oliveros twice. They get a pick of their own and 6 tackles behind the line of scrimmage in total, which is a great day for them. But what makes the whole day rough is just those 3 missed kicks. Kentucky runs the game the whole time. They never are behind. They're never in danger of losing. It's just not a great result for them. So Georgia's going to fall to 2-5 overall, 1-4 in the East. They're going to be down at the very bottom. They're 7th place. Kentucky, on the other hand, stays pretty much right where they are. 4th place in the East, 2-3 in the league, 4-3 overall. But they are on the hunt for a bowl game. All sorts of other aspirations are off. They want a bowl game, and that's about the best that they can hope for right now. Now, moving on down to Death Valley for our game of the week. It's LSU taking on Tennessee. Big top 25 matchup. Probably our preview for the SEC championship game. And Tennessee takes the unusual road win. There's not a lot of road wins in college football in this simulation. There's 3 of them in the SEC this week at least. Tennessee is one of them with just, I don't want to say annihilating LSU because they didn't annihilate them, but they do control the game effectively, 31-14. Both teams are great teams. They're both the best teams in the SEC. That is probably unquestionable, and you can see it with the stats again. Both have complete games. Tennessee has less overall yardage, but they do get 235 yards to the air, 128 yards on the ground. Do run it a little bit more than they pass, only 24 throwing attempts in this game, but they complete those 62% of the time, 34 rush attempts, 3 of their touchdowns to the air, 1 of their touchdowns on the ground. So they've got that good mix going on. LSU's got the same thing going on. 34 attempts through the pass, 273 yards, 150 on the ground on 33 rush attempts, and they're spreading around. They got 4 different guys trying to run the ball. They get a touchdown in the air and a touchdown on the ground. The problem is Tennessee is just so good. They get 3 interceptions off LSU. They sack the LSU quarterback twice. LSU also gets 2 sacks themselves, but they don't get any turnovers. So they don't get to control the game defensively like Tennessee is able to do. LSU gets behind the line of scrimmage 9 times in total. Tennessee only gets back there 4 times. And this is a Titanic game. We're going to see this game again. I don't see either one of these teams losing their division. This is going to be a great game to watch one more time. And hopefully both of these teams can make it into the college football playoff. The problem for LSU is they're not getting the respect that they probably deserve from not just the coaches poll, but also the playoff committee. You see they're 17 here. They do end up falling out of the rankings after this week because of this loss, which probably isn't fair. But they are 5-3 on the season now. Tennessee, on the other hand, is 7-1, 6th in the country, 4th in the playoff poll. With that loss to Liberty, if it wasn't for the loss to Liberty, you would probably see Tennessee as the number 1 team in the country, and they probably deserve it. Even with that loss, even with that weird loss, Tennessee probably deserves to be number 1 in the country. Just a small tidbit on extra points or special teams, because it doesn't come into play this much in this game, but LSU does miss a kick and Tennessee also misses a kick. They do make one from 29 yards. Both teams make all their extra points, which is great, but missing the field goals could have come back to haunt you. So We'll keep it there. We'll move on to College Station with Texas A&M taking on Ole Miss, and Ole Miss finally gets their first win on the season. Congratulations, Ole Miss. I know they've been hunting for it all season. We're sorry that it comes at the expense of Texas A&M, who just is crazy. Texas A&M is just losing these weird games. This is not the same thing that's been happening to them all year, where they lose these weird games at the end of the game. They never really end this one, but they lose a weird one still. Ole Miss was 0-6, 0-6 in the whole season, 0-3 in the SEC, and they come out to College Station. They beat the number 24 team in the country, and start to do some things that they might be able to build on. Texas A&M doesn't have a terrible day. 52% passing. He only throws it 12 times, so you're only going to get 135 yards off those 12 completions. No touchdowns, though. No interceptions. 1 sack. It's not a terrible stat line for your quarterback. Neither is Ole Miss's. 46 attempts. Completes 60% of those. 199 yards. Maybe if you're throwing it 28 times, you want to see more than that. But if you're Ole Miss, a win's a win, right? 2 touchdowns just through the air. They get 120 yards on their 3 different rushers on the ground. Texas A&M gets 154 yards on the ground on their 4 different guys who try to rush it 39 times. Defensively, both teams do pretty good. Ole Miss gets a sack and the 6 tackles for loss. Texas A&M gets their 7 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. So this wasn't a bad game for either team, but somebody has to win. And this is another one where we had tons of punts too, because neither team could really get it going. They just couldn't get it great. Texas A&M punts the ball 11 times for only 554 yards. But I say only because you look at Ole Miss, they punted 10 times for 564. If we go back to the Kentucky-Georgia game, Kentucky punted it for over 600 yards, and I think it was 11 punts. So that's a ton of punts. That's a ton of yardage, but not as much as you probably need to win the game with such a punt differential. Texas A&M is going to fall to 3-5 overall. They're going to be 1-4 in the SEC, and they're going to be 6th in the West. Ole Miss is still going to stay in the bottom, but they get that win that they were looking for. They're going to be 1-6 now and 1-3, and that one is going to carry you to the end of the season because you may not get another one. Just hang your hat on that one. It's a great win for you. You beat a top 25 team in the country who misses an extra point as well. They get their touchdown, they miss the extra point. Ole Miss makes both their extra points, and they miss the field goal. Luckily, none of that came into play, but that game is so tight that it easily could have. Moving on to our last game of the week, it's over to Nashville with Vanderbilt taking on Florida. And Florida, who I didn't know could count to 38, scores 38, and they crush Vanderbilt 38-7 on the road. Vanderbilt has been looking sneaky good all year. They were 3-3 overall. They were 2-2 in the conference. They were looking at possibly being a dark horse contender, and it all comes crashing down with Florida coming to town and just sneaking one away from them. Vanderbilt has, frankly, a terrible day. They throw the ball 30 times, and it only gets caught 10 times. That's 33% for those of you who can do math. 136 yards to the air, 3 interceptions. They try to hit 7 different receivers. One of them caught it at some point. Don't know who, because only 10 catches on 7 different targets, but there you go. 4 different rushers. They only try to run it 14 times, so they only get – this has to be a typo, but I'm not sure that it is. They only have 44 plays for Vanderbilt on the offense. Florida dominates this game from start to finish. 96 yards on the ground for Vanderbilt. That's where their 1 touchdown comes from. They miss a field goal. They make their extra point, but none of that matters because Florida completes 72% of their passes. 24 for 33. 225 yards through the air. A touchdown. They do get sacked 3 times, but who cares? They target 8 different guys. They run the ball through 3 different guys 45 times and get 209 yards on the ground and drive it into the end zone 4 times. They take 3 interceptions from the other team. They only get behind the line of scrimmage for 1 tackles for loss. But defense didn't matter at all here because their offense ran the entire game from start to finish. Special teams was perfect. A 33-yard field goal, capping off their 5 for 5 extra points. And Florida, who you thought was at the basement of the SEC, is now 5th in the East, 2-3 overall. Or 2-3 in the SEC, 3-5 overall. Decent way to look at a bowl game where you might thought for a minute they were only going to win 1 game on the season. Vanderbilt goes all the way down to 6th in the East, 3-4 overall, 2-3 in the SEC, and probably right where they deserve. Moving on to our player of the week, it's Andrew Moncrief, the quarterback for Auburn, who leads his team to down the number 10 team in the country, Missouri. 29 of 50 for his passes, 417 yards, gets 3 passing touchdowns, just plays out of his mind. There was a couple good candidates for this week, and I decided to go with the quarterback because we've had a running back, we've had a wide receiver, we had some contender for a defensive player who could have been player of the week, but Moncrief jumps out at you on the page this week. I believe last week he also jumped out. I mean, Auburn, keep your eyes out if you have to play Auburn because they may just stun you. Moving on to our standings, it's not a whole lot of movement. There's a movement in the bottom half, but the top half mostly remains the same. LSU stays at the top despite their loss. Mississippi State stays number 2 despite their loss. Auburn's right there at number 3, sitting right behind Mississippi State, which is a dangerous spot for Mississippi State to be looking behind them and see Auburn only 1 win off. Mississippi State has more losses, but they've played more games. Alabama's sitting at number 4 in the West. Arkansas is sitting at number 5 in the West. Texas A&M is 6. Ole Miss still down there at the bottom, but you got that one. Way to go, man. Over in the East, it's still Tennessee on top, of course, with their win, still perfect in the league. Missouri takes the loss, but they still stay right there, just a little bit far and above everybody else. The 5-2 overall record is going to carry them pretty far. South Carolina is number 3. Kentucky moves up a little bit, I think, with number 4. Florida moves up a little bit as well. They're now number 5. Vanderbilt drops down. They're going to hit number 6, and you got to wonder what's happened with them. Are we going to see Vanderbilt down on the bottom of the SEC East where they belong? But for right now, that title holds to Georgia, who's 2-5, 1-4 in the conference, but they've got some winnable games coming up, so you hope that they can do it. Moving on to our questions, just to talk about it. Is LSU in danger? Could Auburn, could the War Eagle rise up and take over that slot from them? I can't remember if they have a game coming up still, but actually they do. They have next week. If I look at my next slide, LSU and Auburn is going to play next week. That could be a chance that Auburn has to make a big move on the first place and maybe surprise all of us at a chance for the SEC West. Mississippi State's also still right there. So LSU has some challengers for the SEC West there, where Tennessee doesn't over in the East. It's pretty much just Tennessee over there. Now, has Ole Miss staying in the West? Has Ole Miss found some answers? Can they start to win some games and make some moves? Missouri, they lose that game. Have they been exposed as a fraud? Maybe. That's a tough loss for them. And then staying in that same theme, Georgia, what's their floor? They've got winnable games coming up, but they could also sit right where they're at and be the very bottom of the SEC East. Tennessee, on their hand, is Tennessee the best team in the country? I know Western Michigan's ranked number 1, and they deserve that ranking, but they don't play in a conference like the SEC. Texas State has made some cases. Kansas State may have a claim to that, playing in the Big 12 and being undefeated and winning some big games over teams like Texas. But Tennessee has won games against Alabama, Missouri, LSU, all top 25 teams, all teams who are great in their conference and in their own division. Is Tennessee the best team in the country? I'm not going to say yes because it's Tennessee, but somebody might. So, moving on to next week. We don't have any marquee matchups, but we do have some good ones. Auburn taking on LSU, like we talked about. That could be a chance for Auburn to take a look at moving up in the West. Georgia taking on Vanderbilt, which is going to be a 6-7 East matchup. Georgia's got a good chance to win that game and maybe surprise Vanderbilt and put them where they belong. Kentucky re-entering the top 25, taking on Mississippi State. That's a dangerous game for them. Mississippi State is not a team to take lightly whatsoever. Missouri drops down to number 14. They're going to take on Arkansas, which could be a trap game for them as well, but I expect them to win that game, honestly. Number 24, Alabama. They get back into the top 25. They're going to Ole Miss. Ole Miss probably isn't going to win this game, but they've got their win. Maybe they now understand how to win. Maybe this is their chance. South Carolina taking on Texas A&M, and Tennessee sticks right at number 6, and they're taking on Florida for probably to stay perfect in the East as well. We're going to flip that. All right, moving on to recruiting. We finally get some recruits in the SEC. 2 recruits going over to Georgia, 2 4-stars, a free safety out of Spartanburg, South Carolina, Dennis, Germany, and a 4-star cornerback, Johnny Hansford, out of Oslo, Georgia. Staying local for Georgia, that's great for them. Get that homegrown talent. Spartanburg's not terribly far from Athens, I don't think. Somebody's probably going to tell me that, it's forever. Now, Texas A&M, on the other hand, they also get a 4-star free safety, but they go halfway across the country to the California pipeline and grab Ricardo Camacho out of San Francisco. It's a good get for them, but it's a long way to go. Almost as long is Kentucky, my team, pulling down a 4-star running back, Brian Dowdy, who somebody told me might be the best running back in this class, going all the way up to New Jersey to pull that guy to land their first recruit. These are all the first recruits for all of these teams. These are great gets, including the 4-star quarterback, David DiPaquali from Marrero, Louisiana, for Ole Miss. Not too far to go for him, just one state over. So that's all the recruits that we finally get in the SEC. Tennessee and LSU don't get any. Other teams around the country do, so they fall a little bit further in the rankings in our sSEC weekly rankings. But again, we're not totally worried about it because they still only just have 2. Everybody above them has 3, 4, even Penn State with 5. Penn State coming in with 5 recruits. 4 of those 5 are in the top 5 recruiting board, top 150. So Penn State is going to be dangerous here in a couple years, I think. But that's going to do it for us here at sSEC Weekly. Apologize. There's going to be some repeats in this show. Had to answer a few phone calls, but we did it all in one take. That's great, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about next week. It's going to be exciting for anybody who has a coach. The games themselves are exciting for you personally. They don't have a ton of Hollywood value. They don't have a ton of impact on the rankings, but they are important for every coach who plays, just like every game. But for a lot of these coaches this week, the games we're about to play are important for us. So good luck to everybody in your games. If you've made it this far and you don't play in this league, again, check out the description. It's a lot of fun. SEC is the best in this, just as they are in real life. And we'll catch you over there. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next week.